Hello everyone. Well, it's hard to believe, but it's been over 10 years since the last commercial version of Microsoft Visual FoxPro 9 was released. More specifically, the last commercial release, Visual FoxPro 9, was released to manufacturing on December 17, 2004. Last service pack, October 11, 07. Sedna, a set of add-ons to VFP 9 of X-based components, released January 25, 08. And finally, Microsoft extended support for VFP ends January 13th, 2015. So let me ask you a rhetorical question here. Do you think that VFP is outdated, a dinosaur, a dead programming language? Well, we created this video to show you that the answer is a big fat no. The Fox is alive and well. This video is a tribute to VFP that will show an amazing modern-day software application built entirely with Visual FoxPro. The software application is called AccuTrack. AccuTrack is academic center management software used by thousands of academic centers and colleges and universities across the U.S. and abroad. As you will see, the features and capabilities of this VFP application would be very challenging to recreate even in the latest development environment tools of today. And by the way, AccuTrack and AccuSQL won a University Business Magazine 2012 Reader's Choice Top Product Award and received honorable mention in both 2013 and 2014. Again, AccuTrack is academic management software used by lots and lots of different colleges and universities, built with VFP 9, and we have two versions here, AccuTrack and AccuSQL. AccuSQL is the same interface as AccuTrack with an MS SQL Server backend. Okay. Now, before we start the show, I'd like to acknowledge the key people behind AccuTrack and AccuSQL. Heading the team is Mon Nasser. He's our original developer of the software and our company president. As you can see, he has a bachelor's and master's degree, and he works here in sunny Oviedo, Florida. Next on the list, Dr. Chetan Basas, which some of you may have already know or have dealt with. Anyway, he was a 12 years in a row Visual FoxPro MVP with Microsoft, Microsoft Certified Professional. He earned his MVP status, again, through involvement in the FoxPro community. He's also a licensed medical doctor, and Chetan lives in Izmir, Turkey. And finally, yours truly, I'm a support manager here at Ingenierica. I've been in IT way too long, and I basically help people when stuff gets broken. Okay, now I'm going to go through the feature set, or some of the features of the software, to show you what we've done with Visual FoxPro. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open AccuSQL here. And the first thing we'll see is the main sign-in screen. Anything you see here can be customized, the messages, the logo, the buttons, how the ID mask is handled, the length of the ID, etc., etc. So this is completely configurable. I'll go ahead and sign in as an administrator. And there are different users' roles based on access groups, which I'll show you in a minute. But the first thing I want to talk about is the interface here, the main interface of the software. Now we have the left menu items. And by the way, I can customize any of those menu items. I can change the name of those. I can change the order of those. Reset them back to default if I want. I can hide them if I'd like. So that's completely configurable. Anyway, when I click on a menu item here, I've got two tabs that are Setup and Reports, and these are context specific in that when I click Users and click Reports, for example, I'm seeing all of the reports that are user reports, be it students, tutors, instructors, student groups, sports participants, grants recipients, etc. And if I click Setup, it'll take me to the back-end control panel for that selected item. So in users, I have students, tutors, visit tracking, sessions, etc. If I switch to visit tracking, for example, I have a completely different set of reports and a completely different list of setup options. Okay. Now I can get to all my setup options, the back-end control panel options, by clicking over here, or I can view all of my various canned reports by clicking over on the right on Reports. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the way the grids are set up in AccuTrack or AccuSQL, and I use the terms interchangeably. Again, it's the same GUI, the only difference being the back-end database. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and go into the sign-in log screen. Okay, and you can see I can pin my period filters here. There's a lot of different things I can do. So I'll go ahead and show all of my sign-ins. Okay, and that shows in a grid. Now, what I can do in this grid, I have lots of different options based on right-clicking on the grid. So, for example, I can right-click here on Nick Armstrong, filter on that value, and now I'm seeing every sign-in for Nick Armstrong. Okay, I can subsort or sort on any of these items. So I'm just clicking, and you can see ascending or descending on any of these columns in the grid. Okay, if I'd like to run a report from the grid, I can just right-click and do report, and it'll open the default report viewer. Or if I right-click and do export, it'll immediately open any of those grids based on my selection values in Excel. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you here is how we point to the database. Now, as most of you know, Visual FoxPro database could potentially cause some security concerns, since if you can get to the data path, you can get to the DBF files, well, you could open them up and glean some information out of them. So what we've done to get around that is in our database. Now I'm going to switch to a native database here. I'm also going to mention how we do that in a minute. But what I'm looking at here is a tutoring sample database that we ship with our software. Now it's on the local drive, but that would typically be on a network drive that everyone would get to via a network share or UNC path. But anyway, for argument's sake, we'll just assume that it's out there. Now these are my DBF files, of course, so I could go in there and even use a DBF viewer if I wanted to see all the data in those tables. Okay, so if we were to hide that UNC path, hide that shared path, what we can do is use elevated privileges that the software itself uses to connect to that database. Now, how do we do that? Well, we do that by we store an encrypted file, and then we impersonate using a Win32 API at runtime to make that happen. Okay? Now, while we're here in database location, let's talk about how we can switch from native mode to SQL Server mode, and how we can very quickly upscale a VFP database to MS SQL Server using the software. Okay, so I'm going to switch to my native database here and save it, and it tells me I need to exit, which I'll do. But let's watch the database change here on the fly. So I'll open it again. And I now have a native tutoring database, a non-SQL database, and you can see my logo has changed. I can change my buttons, whatever I want that front end to be. And to switch, you'll see it says not connected to a SQL Server database, but then I can switch here to my SQL Server database, pick it, and save it. And next time I go back in, I'll be back to the database I started with. Now I have routines to back up databases, etc. But now I'm back to my SQL Server database. Okay, now let's talk for a second about upscaling a database into SQL Server. Okay, so here in my database, I have a couple of options. I have transfer database to SQL Server or create a blank database in SQL Server. So when I transfer it, well, it's my current tutoring sample. I can put in my SQL Server connection information. Pick my authentication, be it SQL Server or Windows authentication. And now I can name the database anything I'd like. Let's just call it Chet and Tutor. Okay, I have different native connectivity clients here. I've got all of these installed, but I can test to make sure that's true. And I can also create a public account at the very same time that I'm transferring the database. Okay, so I'll transfer data, and that will begin the process. And it's building the database and the tables, etc., transferring all the data over to my SQL Server. So there it goes. Okay, so now the database exists, and I can immediately go and pick it. So I'll switch to SQL Server mode. Here's my database list. And now I can click directly on my Chet and Tutoring database, test and save, and I've just that quickly transferred the database to SQL Server, and now I'm pointing my client to it. Okay? The create blank database is the same kind of thing. I put in my server, the authentication mode, username and password if it's a SQL Server authentication, name the database what I'd like it to be, pick my client, create a public account, and I can immediately create a blank database on the fly. And I think for argument's sake, I'll switch back to my VFP Tribute database that I was connected to. Okay, now we're going to talk about importing data. Now we'll accept whatever kind of delimited format you'd like to use, albeit CSV, tab delimited, pipe delimited, whatever the case may be. But in my database, I now have an import. Okay, and we have smart imports, a whole bunch of different imports for the various tables. But I'm going to go ahead and import some student information that I've saved here on my C drive. And I have right here student import. Okay, and then I'll pick student information. Now I have a couple of options here about updating the data from the import file if the student already exists in the database. Also, I could inactivate all of the students that are not in my import file if I'd like. But just suffice to say, there are various options about the way we handle that data. I'll go ahead and do an update here. Okay, so I get a preview of my format, and as you can see, actually I didn't show you, but it was a tab delimited format, and it automatically picked that up. So it's going to know what the delimiter is typically. I can do a sub delimiter if I have my data surrounded by double quotes, for example. But I'll go next. The data looks good. Okay, and now it's about drag and drop mapping. So I can drag my columns into whatever columns I have in my SQL Server database in this case. So I'll say this is my user ID, my first name, middle and last, email, I have an address, city, state, zip code, looks like a cell phone number, and a phone. And the only three required are ID first and last. Okay, now I'm going to talk about profile fields. Now, profile fields just store additional information in 10 different fields that we have available in AccuTrack or AccuSQL. Actually, it's much more than that with local labs, but I don't want to get ahead of the game here. But these are the various profile fields that I've set up in the system. So I'm going to say this is my major, this is my minor, did you graduate from high school, and what team are you on? Okay, now once I've done that, I'll click Next, and it's checking that import and saying, well, for profile field minor, I found 2 new values. Would you like to add them to the database and attach them to said student record? Well, sure. Add and return, and it found a new team for my team profile field. I finish. And as you can see, it updated 2 successfully. That means they already existed in the database, and it imported 2 new ones. Okay. Now, I'm not done here yet. I'll show you the import, but right here I can do schedule as automated import. So now it's remembered everything I just did. It remembers the source folder, the source file name, and all of my field mapping. And now I can say, well, in this case, I'm saying Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 6 p.m., go run that import job for me, and it'll do that automatically. Okay. Now, how does that work? Well, that works through a task runner exe that we have as a separate program for MacUSQL, but it runs all of the jobs, the processes behind the scenes. Now, when I say all of the jobs, I can show you what those are. Right here in my system setup, I've got scheduled tasks. Okay, so this shows me automatically signing people out, late media, lots of different appointment reminders, email reminders, periodic import, which right here I have a scheduled import from this particular PC, reports I'll show you later, and success plans, that's emailing to students indicating that they have various tasks that they need to complete. Okay, but that's a scheduled import. Okay, and any of those kind of things can be scheduled. So for example, if I want to send out late media reminders, I can say, okay, let's do that, but I only want to do it at 6 o'clock Monday through Wednesday. Okay, next up we're going to talk about reports a little bit, and I'll go to my visit tracking reports is a good place. Now we've got a lot of different things going on in this screen, things like by activity report. Well, we have a detail and summary report of that report and many others. So if I do a detailed report, for example, it's going to show me exactly what all my students have signed into, what the activity was, their time in, their time out, etc. But I have a summary view of that same report, which is a lot more concise. So now I'm just seeing the number of students that have signed in, the visitors that have signed in to the various activities. Okay. The next thing is the sorting. So I can sort on last name or first name. Positive hours if I'd like. So that's indicates if the student has signed in for 50 minutes, for example, I could round that up to an hour, show their ID or not. And then I have a whole bunch of different filters. Okay. So here I'm looking at a period of time, and again, I think I showed you this, but if I want to pin to a particular thing, I can, and every time I open reports, it'll pin to that period. Okay, I also can run filters combinations. So let's say I want to run my by activity report, but I only want to run it for a certain number of students. Again, in my grid, I don't know if I've shown you this, but I can also instantly drill down to whatever I'd like by typing in my grid. So now I've typed in 5s for my ID, and it takes me directly to that student. And I can pick one or more different filters for who I'd like to run the report for. And I can even combine that with activities. So show me all the sign-ins for that person, but show them when they're the following activities. Okay, so I can do combinations of these various filters when I run the report. Okay, now that's not all. Once I've got these filters the way I'd like them, I can right-click and memorize the report, name it whatever I'd like, make it available to myself or to anyone, put a tooltip, and now I'll do OK. So now I'm going to get out and back into the report to show you how that works. So now if I click by activity here, well, I still have I don't have any filters set, but under my memorized reports now, I've got by activities all LoRa, and my filters will automatically be set for whatever I set them for. Okay, now let's run a report here real quick. And I did that quickly before, but we'll go into a little more detail. This is the Mind's Eye Report Engine ActiveX control up here, and I can do lots of things for all these reports that I run, including saving them, printing them, emailing this as a PDF attachment automatically. I can find, so I can look for a particular record if I'd like. I can zoom in or out. So all of the options that are available via that ActiveX control are in my report viewer here. Also, any report I can immediately export to Excel. Now I can save as a different file format or just open it right in Excel. So I can do that. It'll show my same report. So there's my summary report for my visits. I export it again as a detailed report, and it shows me all of my details. Okay, now the next thing I can do is, let's say I want to go run these reports, but I know I run their same report over and over again, and I like to send it to a certain number of recipients. Well, I can do that in my visit report. It doesn't matter which one, but I'll right-click. Now I could set my filters if I'd like, right? So I could pick my students, let's say, pick a particular activity if I'd like. Okay, but then what I can do is right-click and schedule the report. Okay, when I do that, I get the same box if I'd like, but now it pops open a scheduling window. So I can say, well, every Friday at 6 o'clock from today until, say, the end of May, I would like to email that report with a subject of to Joe and Susie, let's say. I can carbon copy. Here's my message body. And not only can I email it, I can also save it to a shared folder, either or both. So I can email this to Joe and Susie. I could save it out to a public folder and tell Joe and Susie to go out to that folder to get it. And it'll do this now every Friday at 6 o'clock from now until the end of May. Okay, once I do that, then that's in my scheduled reports list right down here. So there's my report. And by the way, my filters are set for that. Now, I'm certainly not pretending to be any kind of Visual FoxPro expert here, but some of you will probably be quite familiar with customizing the report, what that interface looks like. But we've got a back-end report customizer. So now we're looking at the back end of that by activity report, and then those of you with the skills could go in and modify this report, do what you'd like to make it your own. So you can customize any of the reports, the canned reports that are in AccuTrack or AccuSQL. And those go down in my Customize Reports area right here. Okay, now let's look for a second at one more item we can do with reports. This is kind of slick. So I'm going to pick a by activity report. Let's just pick some activities here. How about we do something with math? Okay, so I'm going to pick my math classes. And I'll pick the first math class and then down here. Okay, and I'm going to show that report, see if I have any data there. And I do. I have 9 pages of people in my database who have signed in for various math activities. So what I can do now is create a student group from that data. Okay, so I'll say math people. And my group is created, and I can go look at that if I'd like right here. There's my math people. Okay, but then now that that student group has been built, I can then use the student group as a report filter. So I built it from a report, and then I can use that student group for whatever other report I'd like to run. So for example, I want to see appointments, let's say, scheduled appointments, but I only want to see it for people that are in my math people group. Okay, so I do that. I don't know if I have any data here, but we'll see. And I certainly do. So these are all of my appointments from people in my math student group for my various tutors in this case. Okay. All right. This order by shows up on some of them, but I can change my sort order just by dragging whatever I'd like there, and that appears in various reports where appropriate. Okay, now the next report I'm going to talk about, it's a special kind of report that we've created. It uses Excel COM, but it's called the Chart Visit Reports. So let's go to Visit Tracking here. And when I run this report, we'll run it for some data so we get some information. This is going to save my Excel pivot tables directly for a lot of different information. And you'll see this thing in action in a second here. So now it's building a series of pivot tables based on that data, and you can see it tabbing out at the bottom, but I have lots of different reports that are running. And this is about when the centers are busiest, days of the week, hours of the day, activities, return visitors, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole lot of different information being generated here. But that was with one click of a button. And for a second there, we saw the data behind the pivot tables. Okay, so now it's completed, and you can see I've got lots and lots of different tabs with data in them. Okay, so it generated that many reports from me from that one report that I ran from AccuSQL. Okay, now that's not the only report that we're using the pivot tables for. We've got a program assessment as a good report here, so we'll run that. And these are basically just grades for students in this case. But let's do, I don't know, how about grade distribution by activity, for example. Now it's asking me in this case, well, how many times should the student have visited in order for them to be included in this report? So I'll say, how about 2 visits? And do I want to include their GPA? Or, excuse me, do not include the ones that don't have a GPA? I'll say no. So now it's building another pivot table for me, grade distribution report. And as you can see, I'm looking at activities. Participants are people that have signed in versus those who have not. Which one of them's got an A plus, B, B minus, B, D, F, W, or I, etc. Okay. Same thing can be run for my profile. Now remember, profile was my green team or my major or minor. So when I run that report, it'll ask me, what do you want to base that off of? Well, I'll say base it off of major in this case. And what I'm seeing now are my various majors: communications, computer science, economics, etc., with the grades for those particular students for each of those activities. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears for a minute and talk about communications. Now, in communications, I'm going to go to my setup here, and I have a couple of different things. As you can see, this is my email server, and we do support a Gmail server, so I'm using a Gmail server for all my communications, things like appointment reminders, no-show reminders, appointment notifications. So all of the various communication that I use in AccuTrack can be handled by either my own mail server or a Gmail server. We also support text messaging. So here I'm using Nexmo in this case in order to use text messaging, and that can be used in various places throughout the application. The Communication Center, we have something called an intake system where students get put in a waiting queue. Then you can automatically text message them when they're the next one in line that they need to get to the center because they're ready to be helped. So lots of different places we can use text messaging as well. So I can go to my Communications Messaging Center, for example, and then I can look at various students or tutors, select different filters if I'd like, and it's automatically selecting those tutors. Here I can create a message in my message body and send it via text right here. I can send it via the software itself, email, or both the software and email. So I have lots of different ways of communicating right through the application. Okay. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to discuss here is, as you noticed, there are lots and lots of reports that we've included in the software, so these expand ad nauseum. But we found that our clients never had enough reports. No matter what we built, they always wanted something different. So we spent a good amount of time creating a custom query generator. So in this case, you can build your own queries. We've done all the joins behind the scenes for the various tables, and customers can build their own queries at this point. So I'm going to do a new query here, and then my base entity, my base table, if you will. And now I can expand out and build whatever kind of report I would like. So let's say I want a report that includes my student's last name, first name, and email. But I want to go a little further here. I want to know if they have any appointments, let's say. And I'd also like to know what activities and categories they signed into. And I want to know what time they logged into those. And let's say I want to pick the tutor that they logged in with. Okay, so I've got information here. If we look real quickly, I've got the students table, the appointments table, the activity table, which is actually two tables. Category and activity are two different tables. The logbook, which is the sign-in log table, and the tutor table. So I'm building a report from all those tables right here by clicking on them. Okay, and then I can do filters. So combinations, let's say when they signed in, but I want to know only if their login time is between, how about January 1st, 2014 and January 1st, 2015. Okay, and I can add combinations of filters here. So if I had another one, I could say only where category is math, or only where activity is reading, whatever the case may be. Okay, once I've done that, I move on, and now I can sort and subsort from any of the columns that I added to my query. So we'll say, I don't know, let's sort on category. I could subsort on whatever else I'd like, student's last name, let's say. And I can save this query. So now I'm going to go ahead and save it. And once I finish, then all I have to do next time is load that query I built versus having to build it again. Now, once that information is done, I can use multiple different destinations for the data, like a text file, Excel file, HTML file, XML. I can do a mail merge if I'd want, so it'll take those records, and I can create a mail merge in Word. I can preview that information if I'd like. So here's my various students. I can select some or all of them. And I don't know, let's do Excel, for example. So there is the report I just built and all of the information, including what? First, last email, appointment start and end date, category, activity, login, logout, tutor, etc. Okay? And again, now that I'm done, tomorrow I come in, I want to run that report. Well, all I have to do is load it, and then I'm good to go. Okay? And that report is now ready. Okay, so that's custom query generator. Pretty cool. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to talk about is software auto updates, and I don't really need to go into that. I can let you know that we have an FTP out there that checks for updates. So when I don't have any for this version, but I can download updates and it'll go out and query the FTP if it finds any new files for an update to the software. For example, 14.0.1 in this case, it would go download them to an updates folder out in our database location here. So if I had an update, it would create an updates folder in that shared folder path. Then what it would do, it would say exit and reopen for changes to take effect. But then any other clients that are using that same shared folder path, well, it'll automatically update their clients to the latest version, 14.0.1 in this case. Okay, so that's a completely automated process. Okay, now we're going to talk about access groups. So what I'm seeing here is I have access to everything because I'm a root administrator, but let's go look at access groups. Okay, now I have this tutor group, for example, and by the way, the tutor group is kind of special in that every person that's added as a tutor here will get those same access permissions. Okay, I'm not limited to that. I can create as many different access groups as I'd like and then decide what menu options those people can get to. Okay, so you can see for my tutors, I've got a certain set of options that can be available. Okay, so let's go ahead and log in as a tutor and we'll see how that works. Okay, I'll click my admin and I'm seeing exactly the menu options that I've allowed my tutors to get to in this case. Okay. Now other administrators, see I can't get to system administrators because that's turned off, so that's okay. We'll go back in as root. And if I look at lab assistants, for example, they've got access to hardly anything. but I add those in my system administrator. So here's Jim Lab Assistant. So if I logged in with Jim's credentials, I would only have access to those very few buttons that I've given to my Lab Assistants access group. Okay, Susie Professor is part of my professors group, etc. Okay, not only that, we can also do the same thing with reports access. So here's all of my reports. However, for my tutors group, you can see I've got a lot less reports that my tutors can run. So when they log in and pick reports, they'll get exactly the reports that I tell the tutors that they can get to, or professors or lab assistants. Okay. Okay, and we were talking a little bit about the services that run on the back end here, like when I was doing a schedule as automated import. I showed you these scheduled tasks. Now, how that operates is you can install that either as a Windows service or it's a standalone EXE. It's the workhorse, the task runner that runs behind the scenes. Okay, so let's go look at that real quick. So right here, I have something called AccuTR Console right here. Okay, and that's the standalone EXE that runs those jobs that run on a timer. If I wanted to, I could install the task runner again as a Windows service. Okay, however I choose to do it, it runs the jobs behind the scenes. Those jobs are handled through 3 other EXEs that we are spawning from AccuTR Console or the Windows service. So TR import, TR reminder, TR reports. The reason we separate those is we found that we just had too much dependence on one EXE handling all of those various jobs. So we break them into various EXEs so we have more control over them. Further, we're doing a lot of verbose logging on those jobs. So we can go in, we're saving that in a SQL Server table, and we can find out exactly what the status of those jobs are. If we need to set a flag that ran true, if it did not run true, ran false, then it would run again and pick it up the next hour. So we've got a lot of trial and error with that, but we've come to the point where we have a very stable task processing job running behind the scenes. Okay, now for AccuTrack, again, and I've talked a little bit about it, but you can use it for signing in students. Well, students can also use it for making appointments. Okay, now we have lots and lots of different setup options because, as any of you who have done programming know, this appointments piece, if you've included appointments in any of your programs, it can become a very complex beast. So we've spent a lot of time on the setup of how appointments work. But using AccuTrack or AccuSQL itself, the only way a student would be able to make an appointment would be to go enter their ID and then go through the whole process of appointment scheduling. And I've got a quick scheduler and another scheduler. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but this is the interface a student would use to make an appointment, okay, using quick scheduler. However, that can be inconvenient if you live far away from a computer that has an AccuTrack sign-in station, right? Or if it's 20 below zero and you live in, North Dakota. Okay, so what we're going to do here is use a different program. It's called Web Gateway, okay, and that is a browser-based interface to make appointments, just like AccuTrack's using that interface. Well, we can use it with the browser. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open my Web Gateway right here. Okay, so now I've got my database. We call it Center here, but I can have multiple different databases, and this is using IIS 7, by the way, but that's my SQL Server database. I log in as a student. Okay, and then I can click on Appointments. Now I'm going to talk about that other screen in a second. I schedule an appointment. It shows me the various things that I can create an appointment for. It shows me the staff members that can assist me with College Algebra Lab in this case. I pick a slot of time when I'd like that appointment to happen, and it's going through all of the various appointment rules that I've set up in AccuTrack, like can I do an individual or group, the minimum and maximum length, how far in advance you can schedule it, which tutors, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of setup. I've created the appointment. That was a one-on-one appointment. The block is removed, and now it's waiting for me to schedule another one. Okay. If I'd like to, I can register for a seminar. Seminars are special one-time events in my center, but I can do that directly through the browser web gateway interface. Okay. I go back and look in my AccuSQL. And I can use various methods for looking at appointments, but I'll do Appointment Central is a good one. So let's just pick, I don't think Morgan Freeman is what I said in this case, and go. So there's my various appointments for that period of time. I double click and look, and I can see the details for that appointment. So there's the appointment I just made via Web Gateway, the browser interface. Okay. The other thing I can do with Web Gateway, so I said appointments, I said seminar, special events, seminars we call them. The other thing is surveys, feedback surveys. Okay, so I'm going to go here real quick and look at my feedback surveys. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but what I can do is create a survey directly in AccuSQL, which is very much like a web form, but I can deliver it directly through the EXE here. But you can see I've got radio buttons, check boxes, combo boxes, text boxes, multi-selects, etc. So I can build that form, and then what I would do is go in and publish that. Okay, so I've got this VFP Tribute survey, and I can preview that if I'd like. So this is what my survey looks like in this case. Okay, but then I can determine when and to whom I would like to publish it for. So as you can see, I've got the 5th through the 30th. I'm presenting it to students. I'm presenting it sign-in, and I haven't even talked about labs yet. That's a whole other level of complexity. But I'll go ahead and save that survey. And then when I log in, if as a student I log in, let's try one here. I'm getting my tribute survey. And then I would sign in, go about my normal business. And I'm being put in an intake system. I'm kind of running through quite a bit here. But ultimately, depending on my rules, I could then sign the student in with whomever I'd like. Okay? All right, now the other thing I was trying to get to here is let's log out and log in here with the student ID, hopefully one that hasn't already gotten my survey. And when I do that, there's my VFP Tribute survey that I just showed you in AccuSQL, and here's what it looks like running through Web Gateway. Same survey through the browser. Okay. And then I go about my business. I schedule my appointment, register for my seminar, whatever I'd like to do. Okay. Now back in AccuSQL, let's go look at those surveys one more time. And I've got survey reports. So let's look at my VFP Tribute survey. And it shows me that a few people have answered that. Let's see, 33.3% like my tutoring center, 66% don't, so maybe I should work on that a little bit. But there's the various survey questions and the answers to them. Okay. Now I have another report here. Remember the profiles, major, minor, team, etc. So I can run that same report, but now it's going to be a pivot table that's based on my profile questions for that particular area. Okay. So a lot of power there. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is briefly local labs. I don't want to run too long and bore you guys and gals, but what local labs do enable me to completely change the look and feel and the way the sign-in logic happens just with one lab assignment. And let's go real briefly look at that. I want to look at the back end here. Okay, so you see where lab says default. So I can go through my various configuration options here in AccuSQL in this case. Okay, when I do that, I'm setting them up for my default lab. But if I'd like to, I can change labs completely. For example, I'll change to computer lab so we can see how that works. And save that guy. Now when I go back to my control panel, I can set up a whole bunch of options again, but now I'm setting them up for my computer lab. So I can break this one database up into multiple different labs, and it can behave completely differently. Okay? Not only that, I can create things like custom surveys, as you may have seen, for a specific lab. So I can have different questions. Say I want VFP Tribute, for example, to only appear at my computer lab when students sign into that lab. Now, how do we know what lab they're signing into? Well, it's what I just did. You'll tell the computer itself that, hey, you're the computer lab. Now, when I go back to my sign-in screen here, well, you'll see it's completely different. I have a different background. I have a different message. I have a different box, a message box, and different buttons. Okay, so you can do that for all of these various labs, again, using one database. Same thing with profile fields. So if I go look at my profile setup, well, I've got questions here, right? That's for my computer lab. Here, let's look at the ones that look familiar to us. So major, minor, did you graduate from high school, and team. But then if I switch to my computer lab here, I have 10 more questions that I could deliver in my computer lab or in any other lab that I may have, math lab, reading, et cetera, okay? Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about, and I can go on because we've got lots of features I probably will think of later. Here's a nice one. Find is kind of neat. So if I do like weighting options, for example, it will take you directly to either the screen or the set of menus here that take you right to the option that you've typed. Okay, so real quick way to find the information you're looking for in the database here. And I think I'll go ahead and set this thing back to default lab while I'm at it. Apple support. Okay, now I'll just show you here real quickly. I didn't have a way to get a screen capture of the iAccu device. This is an Apple device that's used for portable attendance, and I think I've got a URI out here that'll show you that. So here's some screenshots of that, but we've got an app from the Apple Store where it behaves just like AccuTrack in that you pick the reason you're coming in, the student, the rules, just like when I was signing in as a student before. However, it's through an iAccu app. Okay. Now, how does that work? It's storing data out on the secure cloud, non-sensitive data out on the cloud, and we're actually storing that back on the Apple device, and then it syncs back and forth. So syncs from the Apple device to the cloud to the AccuSQL database. Syncs uploads from the AccuSQL database to the cloud, syncs back to the iAccu app. Okay. Now here, I have an iAccu Exchange, and if I want to download swipes from the portable devices, I click yes, it runs updates, and it goes ahead and pulls the data back to my database via the sync, and then I can go look at my sign-in logs, and it would show me any new sign-ins that had happened on those Apple devices right back in my logbook table here in AccuSQL. It seems like the sky's the limit with what can be accomplished with VFP. We have so many thousands of man-hours from our awesome team working in it, but I hope you guys love it too, and I hope that we've shown you something interesting here. And by the way, for any of you who have hung in there through the end of this presentation, the classes that I was showing you for like the super table, remember when I was typing in the grid and changing ascending, descending on the columns, I was searching, I was exporting, I was reporting. That's all part of the Foxy Classes VFP library that we developed in-house. Normally we would charge for that, but as a tribute to VFP and for you guys that have watched this, we're going to go ahead and make those classes completely freely available to you. So if you go to foxyclasses.com, we're going to let you have those VFP libraries at no charge. Okay? Okay, thank you all.